Okay, so this is the part 2 to the whole adoption issues video, which was originally titled, Not Having Parents is a Good Thing, but that's not really the title I wanted. So I had to, figure out how to fit everything in there. So, I completely forgot to mention this in the part 1. This can also go along with, how Let Me Help You lunatics and even other types of people can often offer things they know they really can't give and don't have. But there's also a side to it to where, the person could just be lying anyways because they don't really want you around anymore. One of their relatives does and they don't want to admit that. But to get to the point, the racial side with how adoption may not work or be possible. Or even just somebody trying to help you, but especially with the adoption side, I remember there was this whole situation with this lady back in Cali, which I'm not going to really go too in depth into that because I feel like I was about to go on a rant and be somewhere else. But, she was nice, but she just took up for sexual predatory type people, which I've talked about women with those types of issues. But anywho, so, she lived in some apartment and she invited me over one day to give me some clothes, some pants that, either her or her daughter couldn't fit anymore. And I think it was her because I'm really small and her daughter was 13, but most 10-year-olds and 9-year-olds are bigger than I am. And the mom had health issues, so she was pretty small. So yeah, they were her pants. Now that I'm remembering right. And she was like, you can have my pants, and I think she may have given me a shirt or something. And just me coming over to her house and knocking on her door to get that made her racist neighbors mad, and they reported her to HOA. In fact, I even remember one of the neighbors and how he talked junk to me and asked me what I was even doing in the neighborhood just over me coming and knocking on her door. And then there was also some stuff with her daughter and her excuse was that her daughter had BPD. Plenty of people had BPD. I've had BPD type symptoms, but that was her excuse for why her daughter was kind of mean. But anywho, her daughter would rarely ever answer not rarely ever. Her daughter wouldn't answer the door when I would come knock, and so sometimes I would be out there for some minutes. Then the mom would be at work, and yeah, sometimes I wouldn't remember that she was at work at that point in time or that time during the day. And so I'd be waiting, and then the daughter was kind of scared of the mom because the daughter was severely traumatized because of a lot of bullcrap her mom allowed, which just even goes back to how people feel some type of way about you when they feel okay, my parents don't even treat me right and let these people over here do all types of crap to me, but now my parent is trying to play hero savior for some random person's kid or for some random kid, but won't even do the same stuff for me, and that causes all types of issues and jealousy. And then also something with I guess something with trauma where supposedly the kids didn't like to answer the door, but it was a lot of bullcrap with that. But anyways, stuff like that, racial stuff like that can cause a lot of issues and can keep somebody from being able to quote-unquote adopt or quote-unquote foster you or even let you come over just for 2 seconds to get some pants. That can cause some issues. And I remember I was supposed to do some cleaning work for her, and then the neighbors didn't like me being in the neighborhood at all. But another thing that could go along with that. Oh no, because I didn't finish the last thing I was saying. Okay, so what I was saying is that being in these types of racial or uppity areas could cause a lot of issues. People can try to make it about homeless hate, but racism can definitely be easily covered up with homeless hate or even just classism. It typically goes hand in hand with classism. And then it's also like even just the assumption, because it's that, wait a minute, it's assumption also that people even know I'm homeless. Like, sure, there's the whole orphan energy thing, which I talked about before, which is really what people are picking up when they feel like you're homeless. Like, there isn't a such thing as really looking, well, I mean, there is, but especially with homeless youth, typically they don't look like people's stereotypes. So really what people are picking up is that you don't have a family. That's the energy they're picking up, which can also make people accuse you of being homeless when you're really not. But realistically, even if you have a place to stay, as long as you don't have a family, you really are homeless, which that's a whole other topic. But anywho, people could assume that it's even about the people thinking I'm homeless, but it's like, they don't really know that. What they do know is that they see a quote-unquote black kid walking around their neighborhood, and very often, especially when I'm like around, or when I'm in mostly white areas, they assume, for whatever reason, that I'm an 11 to 14-year-old black boy, and I've been treated so much worse and been put in even more dangerous situations behind people thinking I'm a quote-unquote black boy. And so that's another reason why, like, a lot of this whole thing with people saying that they want to, like, take you in is bound to go left, because, like, you can end up in situations where they're okay at first, and you already know that, like, you're most likely not going to stay long term, and they already know that, and you're only staying for, like, a couple of days at that, and then that can turn into racial situations breaking out, where racist neighbors start reporting them for having you over, and start reporting them to HOA and the rent office. And then they're like, well, yeah, you're just gonna have to leave because I don't want to end up getting kicked out and I'm gonna get kicked out. But this is also another thing that I could say with this. The boy that I mention often as one of the two love of my life is not the one that's being trafficked by the U.S. military, but the other one. The one that's been mostly homeless since 14 or whenever his mom died. So, it's been getting talked about a lot the past couple years with all the NAZIS stuff and the B system stuff that's been rolling out in America. How, like, apartment complexes in hoods are cracking down more on who's really living in the house and how many people. And this boy, his dad has like 6+ kids, but I know at least 6. And of course there's also like a lot of issues with the whole quote unquote dad situation anyways, but another reason he's been homeless and being thrown around at cousins' houses and stuff is because, like, since the cracking down with how many people are living in the house and who's on the lease in the hood and apartments, he's not really supposed to be in like any of the apartments. So he has to be homeless and bouncing around at 14. Well, he's 17 right now, but since 14, because he legally can't live with his own parent because of stuff with the lease and how many people are in the house. And it is really interesting how these laws have been getting cracked down on, because throughout my life I've never been on a lease, like, ever. Which can even go back to the whole thing with how once I became full-blown homeless, I realized that I had been hidden homeless my whole life due to a couple of different reasons. I've also been full-blown homeless a couple times in the past as well, before, like, being visibly full-blown homeless by myself. But anyways, I've never been on a lease before. And there's a lot of stuff with that. And there's only a certain amount of people you can have, which, there's just a lot of stuff with that, but the racial side especially. Like, even if the whole neighbor supporting thing doesn't happen because they're trying to figure out why whatever person is letting some black kid in the neighborhood, there's also even the thing with, like, the rent office and how there's cameras and stuff. Like, they know that nobody really comes outside, nobody really comes outside, but no kids really come outside, to put it better. And so, like, they're paying attention, or they're going to be paying attention to the one quote-unquote black kid that they see walking around outside, or getting out the bus, whatever in the world. And what else was it that I was gonna say? Oh yeah, and like when the rent office people see somebody that they don't recognize, especially when they know that like really no quote unquote black people live in this place or in this area or even maybe in this whole city or state, which was especially the case back in Cali, they know to keep an eye on you and to figure out and wait a minute, to pay attention to whose house you're going into so they can reach out to them to tell them about how you're not allowed in the neighborhood and stuff like that. That's another thing that I meant to mention in the part one that people do not think about. So this is another reason why adoption, quote unquote, and fostering, quote unquote, isn't really much of a possibility because it's not really all that legal when it comes to like housing type stuff, especially with apartments. But even the houses are ran by HOA, but as long as there's snitchy neighbors, there's always going to be issues. Even if you're just coming to get some clothes, some food that the person wants to give you, you're going over to talk to them to help them clean up. Especially when it's a racial situation, it's always going to be an issue. And then the person's not going to want you around anymore because even if you just come to visit for 2 seconds or pick something up, they know that they're going to get in trouble and they're going to risk being kicked out for having a quote unquote black person in the neighborhood. And especially if they say that this person is homeless, that's going to cause even more issues. Obviously would cause even more issues. And then if you're younger too, then there's going to be questions and they're going to probably be told stuff like, well, why would you even bring some random homeless black kid around your kids? And then like CPS threats could pop off if they have kids, and because people will say that they're putting their kids' life in danger. And what else was I going to say with that? Or something else. Wait a minute. Oh yeah, and then people will like have questions because they'll be like, well, there must be something going on, or they must have did something to get kicked out, because at their age wait a minute, at their age there's some parents that they're supposed to be living with somewhere, and it sounds like a risky situation, stuff like that that people will say. It could just cause so many issues, and that's something that people often don't even talk about. And oh yeah, in my last video I was talking about how I was waiting for the bus. The bus has not came, and I've been out there multiple times since before 12 p.m. Like, I think I went out there the first time at 9 and waited a little bit and it didn't come. And now it's 6. And Google's claiming it's going to come at 7, but I don't know if that's true. I don't know if, like, that route isn't running today or what. But I'm very confused with that. And crap, in uppity or mostly white areas, if you're just walking around in the neighborhood and you don't look like you're from there, and you're not quote-unquote white, and they know that, like, you don't live there, or they assume you don't, it could lead to just some dangerous situations, even if you're just walking through an area to, like, go to a store or something, or to go to work, which even makes me think back to that video about backpack discrimination, how if somebody has a backpack, they're automatically assumed to be homeless. And people are saying this like only if you're not school age, but honestly that's not true. Even if you're school age, especially if you're not quote unquote white or a little white girl, then that it just causes so many issues. But somebody had told a story about how they once had someone tell them to stop loitering when they were walking through a neighborhood leaving work, and because the person assumed they were homeless. And even people that have never been homeless before, when they tell stories like that and talk about how it actually opens up their eyes to how people really are and how weird people are. But yeah, so like just being seen in an area where people feel like you shouldn't be at and don't belong can cause issues, which even makes me think back to Cali, which I'm not even just talking about Cali, I mean anywhere, but it makes me think back to especially some situations I was in Cali, and how when I first went there, this one dude kept telling me that he didn't feel like it would be a good place for me, and landlord wouldn't work out there because I'm quote unquote black and I stick out like a sore thumb, and how he just told me a lot of different stories about things he witnessed and different stuff like that, about how he didn't think it would work out and how he didn't think I would survive there. And I had somebody else tell me that as well. In fact, the other person was the lady that the pants situation happened with. And that's another reason why you should always watch out for people that are like trying to do things that they don't really have the power to do or really can't do. And they're trying to do it in spite of what somebody who's over them or even what other relatives say. Kind of like the situation with Ms.S, which Ms.S is a dangerous person anyways, but like the situation with Ms.S and J, and how like Ms.S's ex-husband didn't want homeless people around, and her grandson was supposedly scared when Jay got into an argument with her, even though the grandson has to fight the grandma pretty often as well. And he's even in there talking about how he only has 3 years left till 18 to escape from her, which is why I find it so weird for him to feel upset about somebody else having to argue with her in an argument that she started, she being Miss S, when he knows what the type of stuff she does. It just doesn't make sense to me. But if other people around don't want you around, it's always going to be some issues with that. And I think it also can go into how, like, even if somebody does want to be nice, other people are going to screw that up. And so it still goes back to the whole nobody cares thing. But it's not even just about nobody caring. It's about people being flying monkeys and, well, not even flying monkeys and enablers. I don't even think that those terms fit this situation and description. But people are always looking to screw some stuff up. And it's kind of funny because people will say things like, I don't want to take responsibility for other people's failures and stuff like that. But people do put a lot of effort into screwing up random people's lives.